We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every man should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer, the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is real and
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is November 19th, 2015, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, occasionally for the last hour on Monday, but on Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen on Spreaker.com and NonPartisanLibertyForall.com. You can also listen directly through Facebook and get the link through Twitter as well. Here on Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we are different than the government media programs or radio shows where we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning be able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, as opposed to being a conservative or a progressive or Democrat or Republican and trying to convince people that the whole world is based on these two parties, as well as exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. Again, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. Yesterday, we had a extra long show that actually ended up going 4 hours, actually a little over, like 4 hours and 5 minutes. There was a lot of information to cover. Tonight, we will be joined by Ken Schortgen, who will help to tie some of that information together and give some more answers regarding things like the terrorist attack in France and what's going on in the Middle East and in these other countries, as well as how it affects the economy. But before we get to that, and Ken will be joining us at 8 o'clock Pacific time, 11 o'clock Eastern time. Before we get to that, I wanted to cover what I had talked about yesterday that I didn't get to. So yesterday, because I had so many things that I wanted to cover and I spent a lot of time on them, essentially I could have done shows on a lot of these topics, individual shows, and some of them I have already in one way or the other, or shows that were similar or a similar topic. But one of the things that I said I would cover today that I wanted to get in yesterday, which I thought it was very important, is the UN and world government and this document that I mentioned yesterday, the New Global Partnership, Eradicate Poverty and Transform Economies Through Sustainable Development, the report of the high-level panel of eminent persons on the post-2015 development agenda. I had read this a couple years ago. They didn't write this in 2015. And this is really nothing new. If you look at the Agenda 21 document, the original, I believe they contributed more to it or rewrote it or did something with it. Who knows what's going on most of the time at the UN or what their true agenda is. But Agenda 21 originally, I know, was written when George Bush Sr. was president. And basically what it was about, and the words, of course, you hear all the time in it are sustainability and sustainable development, because that's kind of what it was about. The ability to sustain life on the planet, and they didn't word it in that way, but I guess if you're going to summarize it in a nice way, it would be to look at things and say, well, we're going to run out of resources. So they make all these assumptions, which I think are bullshit anyway, because what happens is, as we run out of one thing, for example, new technology develops, and you can't base things off of how things exist today. I really don't think you can do that. So even with, let's assume climate change for a minute is real, or that it's a danger, that when I say real, that it's to the extent that most of these scientists, or at least the ones that are getting paid, I think they're all actually getting paid, no matter what side they're on, are saying, but the ones that are saying basically it's the end of the world pretty soon if something isn't done. If the United States doesn't tax everybody with some type of carbon tax for the carbon they breathe, their car, all of this shit, the world is going to explode. And I don't understand how people don't question, anytime it comes to we need money, we need to force a tax upon you, I question the motivation there. But anyway, let's assume, that that's true. That's something similar, where looking at resources and looking at, are there enough resources for the world and the world's population to sustain themselves for however many years? Because they will say, the UN will say, well, based on the resources we have, and even Obama fucking said this, based on the resources currently, people in Africa can't have electricity or something. It was something along those lines. It wasn't as a popular radio show host said over and over again. Obama said you can't have electricity in Africa. Well, okay, he kind of said that, but what he said was based on the amount of resources, which I still think is bullshit, because there are so many different ways. And as technology continues to advance, you look at in 100 years, people might not even be living on the planet. So this tax and this sacrifice of living in a tiny little apartment, because these are all things that are have been talked about as part of Agenda 21, basically living in a 400 square foot or 200 square foot apartment, and the stack and pack apartments that all stack up like a project, except they're tiny And then, of course, the police and the government can easily watch you. And everybody's packed into the cities, lives near their jobs, doesn't have cars because they don't need them. Everything's close together. That whole thing. So they're basing that off of... Now, I don't even think they're right with their calculations here. But, you know, I'm not a scientist, so what do I know? But there's always political agendas that come into these things. So if they're asking for all this money, you got to question something where they're asking for, you know, a tax on carbon based off of what, when the rest of the world is doing whatever they want. Anyway, and again, they're basing it off the current way of life. So what they could be doing is looking at ways to build some kind of dome or ways to build what do you call them? The word escapes my mind. Settlements on other planets or whatever. There's so many other things that they could, of course, be thinking of. And again, with the technology, a lot of things are going to change anyway. But that shows to me that it's bullshit. And that's why if somebody says to me, well, you know, if you don't believe in global warming, you're nuts. And or man-made global warming. There may be global warming or climate change that is natural to the environment as the earth just changes because it has in the past. But that I'm nuts and that we need to change. It always changes though, because it's like, oh, if we start doing something by like the time that we start doing something, it's always, well, as long as it's by this time, it's okay. And then that time passes, and it should be, well, it's too late, don't bother. But no, it's like, well, as long as it's this time, it's okay. As long as we start by this time. And obviously, you can't control what other countries do anyway. Global warming was not the point of what I wanted to talk about, although it is part of this because that's one of the ways they exploit this whole thing, a world government, because those are that is one of the few things that in order for it to quote unquote work, you'd have to get every country, every person in the world to comply with it. So that's where you use something like that, not only for world government, but for the taking away freedom and controlling people. Because if you say, hey, we can't drive cars anymore because of the emissions, so we have to live near our jobs. We can't run electricity anymore like that, so we need little tiny apartments. We can't, as I was saying, have cars, so not only jobs are near each other, all shopping and all stuff like that has to be near each other. So you just stack things. And then to be able to watch a city is really easy because everybody's right there. You have everybody all in these little houses, and they've been promoting them. I've seen them on a show on MTV, which I don't know why they call it MTV anymore or why it even exists, because I don't think they've played a video in like 10 years or something. But that's all part of the Agenda 21 stuff, in which leads to world government. And that is all kind of part of this document. So within this document,